Wherever you are and however you're listening, thank you so much for being back with us on another episode of Winning the Moment. Today I have Joe Jensen, and you won't believe it, but he is already retired. He has created time freedom. You may think of it as financial freedom, but he breaks that down in a fascinating way that I really love, and he also gives us his loving life framework. I know it's an episode you're going to love. Be sure to like and subscribe, and most importantly, enjoy the episode. Today's episode, we have Joe Jensen. He doesn't look retired if you're watching on YouTube, but turns out he is. So that's going to be a fun conversation to get into. Joe, thanks for being here.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
How did we get connected? I know it was like vicariously through Blue Form, but what was do you remember the backstory? It was like 6 months ago. So I don't
I don't know.
remember.
I think we have some common contacts. Like said, we've been on a couple of the same podcasts.
Yeah.
And someone reached out to me and asked me to be on it. So I was like, let's do it. And then I canceled on you and we had to reschedule. But here we are. So I'm glad we're making it
better
happen.
late than never. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about kind of how you got here, your backstory. You're sharing some stuff with me off camera. That's really interesting. Are you from St. George originally?
Not originally. I grew up middle of nowhere. No one's even heard of it. There's this little town called Garrison, Utah, of like 200 people out on the Utah-Nevada border.
Wow.
Yeah, and I wasn't even that town. I was 20 minutes outside of it on a ranch, like just me and my family and one neighbor. There was less than 1,000 people within a 100-mile radius. I mean, we're talking middle of nowhere.
Did you like growing up like that?
I mean, it was the only way I knew.
Yeah,
I had nothing to compare it to, right? And so it was fine. I didn't choose to raise my kids that way. But, it worked.
So you didn't mind it, but you wouldn't duplicate it.
No, I like people. I'm like a very social person. I love like friends and doing things, and there was less of that out there, so I kind of missed out on that. And I could see it even when I was growing up. I'd be like, damn, I wish there was like a little more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was good. Like I also avoided a lot of headaches and drama that I didn't have to deal with. Yeah.
How old were you when you left that?
I was 17.
Holy shit. So you that's all you knew.
That was it. Yeah. I mean, I'd travel, would stay with friends in the summer and things like that. So I knew the real world.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like my everyday. Yeah.
How interesting.
Yeah.
So how big was like your graduating class?
It would have been 7, which was a big year because there was only 36 kids, 7 through 12.
Wow.
Tiny little.
So did you go to all one same school then?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I mean, it was all like basically one building, this tiny little. Yeah, it was very, very small, which is wild. And then I left my senior year and moved to Provo, and so they only had 6 that year instead of 7. So Did you finish high school in Provo then? I didn't. I was like, dude, I'm not going in to some big old school as like the weird new kid from the middle of nowhere, like not senior year when everybody's like set.
Yeah.
So I just got my GED and went to university. I was like, if I'm a freshman, everybody's new, so we'll just do that.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So I kind of went with that instead.
Did your family move to Provo or did you go on your own?
No, my whole family moved.
Yeah. Oh, they did. So, okay.
Yeah, but I'm the youngest of 5, and my siblings had all gone away, and my oldest sister was having babies, and my parents were like, let's just go into the real world and be around our grandkids. What are we doing? So
how did that feel for you as like a 17? Was that exciting, scary?
I was stoked, yeah. I was like, let's go, dude. Like, I was ready for it, for sure.
And so growing up in Utah, did you grow up in the LDS religion?
I did grow up in the LDS religion.
So when you moved to Provo, it was like, we're going to BYU?
Yeah, it was like the only college I knew existed. That's how like ignorant of it I was. Like later I found I'm like, I could have just gone to UVU. That would have been way easier.
That's funny.
But it's funny because when I moved to Provo, I didn't even stay that long. I moved to California when I was 17, out on my own actually, because there was like this girl out there I wanted to date.
Oh, really?
And so I just, looking back, I'm like, oh, that's kind of young, but at the time it made sense. So I moved away when I was 17, but then I moved back and lived with them. Then I went on a mission and moved back. So I was like in and out.
Yeah.
Living with my folks. Always had a really good relationship with them. But yeah.
So when you moved to California for that girl at 17, did that throw you off your mission path?
No, I still was like, I was all in, maybe. I was all in. Nothing was going to stop me. I was going. Like, it broke my heart, and she was like, we wrote for a little while till she Dear John me and the whole 9 yards.
Is Dear John when she tells you you're out?
Yeah, that's when she's like, sorry, I'm not going to wait for you.
How far in did you get before you got that note?
Less than a year.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good.
Letters
I got
years.
some gift packages and had someone, but yeah, it didn't last that long.
Where did you go on your mission?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Real
interesting. Exotic. Yeah.
How was that?
It was cool, Like I think I did 10 years of door to door after my mission, and it was a good setup for learning how to knock doors.
Man, I tell you what, people go on a mission, it really forges that like ability to earn money because you obviously are getting told no all the time
for free,
but you have to keep you pay even but you got to keep knocking the next door. Like that's so hard to teach someone. And if someone's trying to make money and they go to 100 doors and get 100 no's, it's hard to keep that kid motivated. But you already had all that scar tissue built up from 2 years of a mission that like...
Yeah, and growing, I'm the stereotypical door-to-door guy. Like growing up on a ranch, you learn to just work hard. Like these small-town kids, when you learn to just grind and you learn to say no to a lot of fun. Like you're not playing all the time. I think that's one of the biggest things that is hard is for people to go on missions and people to go out for the summer is you're denying yourself of all the play that you could be having, the Powell trips and the fun and this and that. But that wasn't my life, man. Like I grew up in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have a lot of that. Like I wasn't denying a lot of play. I didn't know any better. And so it was easy for me to do all that.
So you had that work ethic. You had 2 years of door knocking and also you're a different generation too, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I started, like, I remember my second year, I won an iPad because they were invented that year. Like there was no iPads. I didn't even have a cell phone in college my first year. Like,
so what year were you born?
85.
85. Okay, so I was born 87.
Yeah,
we got the best generation.
We got a little mix of it all, right? Yeah.
We got to like experience it, like the iPhone and the iPad. Like we got to be around for, and we also got to be kids without all that shit.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, my growing up was wild. Like we literally had like 300 acres or something. We just go wander the land, and my mom had this giant train bell that like she would ring. We'd just hear ding 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 ding, like dinner time, and these little feral children would go run home from wherever we were at on the ranch. Like
the contrast to today, where it's like you can't let your kids out of your sight. Okay, so you went on your mission. Did you come back and know like instantly I'm gonna do door to door?
No, dude, I was like, I'm never knocking a damn door again in my life.
Oh, really?
I was like so against it. So I got back when I was like barely 20. Or almost 21, right before I turned 21, I guess. And then I didn't go out selling until I was 24, like late 24.
Oh, interesting. So you took a hiatus.
Yeah, I was never going to go.
What was the reasoning for that?
I married a girl that had a lot of debt, and I was like, crap, how am I going to make money? And she was like $20,000 in debt. And all the advertising at that time was, you can make $20,000 in a summer. And I was like, I never made money. I had no clue how money worked. And I was like, wait, I can make 20 grand in a summer, then I could pay off that debt. Like, that'd be great. I never had debt.
Was she the same age as you?
She was younger. She was like...
How'd she have 20 grand in debt?
Just student loans. I don't know. It was
like she was like living off of it, like getting the student loans and like paying her living expenses.
No, she just went to some stupid university in Virginia that was expensive, and her parents just signed her up for all these student loans, and she didn't know any different, and it just racked up. She didn't even finish school. Like she had no degree. It was just like it was just kind of a mess. And I never had debt in my life. Like debt was the devil in my world, and I never had a penny of debt. And so I was like, I thought it was so overwhelming at the time. Like I thought I was gonna have to
20 grand is a lot.
I mean, yeah, I thought I was going to have to declare bankruptcy. I was like, how does this work? But luckily I learned how to go make money and how to create value. And it kind of, set me up on a pattern to really a lot of self-improvement and growing and learning how to be around people that make money and just seeing bigger vision, which changed my life.
I was going to ask, what was the catalyst to because obviously you're sitting here retired today, right? So you're 39, almost 40 maybe.
Yeah.
And you're already retired, so obviously, like somewhere along that journey, you started picking up those skills and traits. And so, what did that look like? What was your evolution in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for me was being in an environment of success, right? So, that for me, it was the sales teams, right? I was around people who were making real money. They had expectations for even more money, and I was like, "Whoa!"
You'd really never been exposed to that.
Never.
Before.
I'd never even known anybody that had a new car. Like I grew up dirt poor. Like we just didn't have things, and the people in our world didn't have things. And so when I was around that, it was like, oh, there's so many more opportunities. And they're like, oh, and here's the skill set how to get it.
Yeah.
And so then you start doing a lot of I don't know why sales and self-improvement are so tied hand in hand, but it's
it's because sales is a mental exercise.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
For sure.
It is such a mental game that if you don't have your mind right, you can't have your sales right. So I feel like anyone that gets into any high level of sales, you're going to invest in those books and you're going to invest in personal growth because like you then become your product.
You do. Yeah.
You
just
are
can't
your business.
survive without it.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. And so I got in that world of self-improvement and sales and entrepreneurship and just like, Jocko 100 extreme ownership style life. And that kind of pivoted my whole viewpoint of what was possible. And so I kind of was buying a little bit of real estate along the way.
And did you have a mentor that was like getting you, like saying, hey, here's what you need to do with this money that you're making in the summer, like don't waste it? What got you into real estate?
My dad dabbled in real estate, like old school, like save up for 20 years, buy a house.
Yeah.
Save up for another 20, buy another house.
Yeah.
So a long, slow road.
Yeah.
But I saw the writing on the wall. I was like, this is important. I don't understand why, but like real estate's where it's at. I just knew it was. And so my dad gave me some pointers of what he knew. And so that got me at least to get in the game, even though I had no idea what I was doing. And
what was like your first investment property?
Yeah, it was just like a townhome down the street from my dad. I was like, dude, I got to buy something or I'm never going to buy anything. He's like, well, there's something for sale down the street. I'm like, I'll buy that. Like no clue of how to run due diligence or numbers or like comps. I had no concept for what I was doing, but my dad kind of walked me through it a little bit and, from what he knew and it got my foot in the door. And then I bought a couple more properties over the next few years. And then I took like a hiatus of like 7 years of stopped buying because I was waiting for the market to collapse again, which it didn't ever. It still has not. And but then in 2020, I got divorced. And I was like, I can't be running sales teams anymore. Like, what am I going to do? And that's when I was like, I'm going to go all in on real estate. Luckily, I had a bunch.
So it's relatively recent.
Yeah. I mean, I went from like 5 units to like 35 units in 18 months. Like, I just went ham that year back in 2020. And I gave myself a year. I said, look, if I can do this and if I can replace all of my expenses with cash flow in this 1 year, then I'm not going back to the doors.
Were all those doors after your divorce?
Yeah, all but the 3 I have or whatever. Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, so that worked out. Yeah, she's always like, "Oh, I couldn't have done that a couple years earlier."
So, what got you like? Obviously, you went through a transition. So, was your divorce like a COVID divorce? I know a lot of people during COVID had like. Yeah, they were with each other all the time. It was different, you know?
I mean, I was still working a lot during COVID. I was selling solar in Hawaii and it was great. I freaking loved it. But I was still working. Like, COVID didn't really slow me down at all with anything. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We could get into all that. But it's honestly like we were doing the door-to-door sales thing. It was like in the summer, we were too busy to get divorced. Because we were just like the grind of summer is insane.
Did she sell too, or
no? She didn't.
But you were just gone.
But I was just busy, and we had always talked about divorce and stuff, but because we didn't have we weren't super compatible, but like life was good, so we're like, what are we complaining about?
Yeah.
But every year we'd talk about divorce. But in the middle of the summer, it's like, well, not right now. Like, let's finish the summer, and whatever we do will be easier with a couple $100,000 in the bank.
How many years were you talking about divorce for?
11.
Oh shit! Yeah, so like the whole time,
the entire time, yeah. And
how interesting.
And then in the off season, we were having too much fun. We're going to Cancun. We're going to award ceremonies. We're winning prizes and trips, and we're just loving life. And we're like, well, let's not do it right now. Like, let's enjoy this. And then summer would start, and it wasn't until we moved to Hawaii, stopped traveling, stopped leaving for the summer, slowed down, and life was like so good, but like things with us still wasn't good.
Yeah.
That I think it was like, oh, yeah, this is never going to be good.
Where in Hawaii did you live?
Oahu.
I lived in Kauai.
Oh, Kauai's great. How long did you live out there?
Like 6 months. I moved there right after I graduated high school.
Nice. Love it, man.
Yeah, it was great. Okay, so you're in Hawaii. Now you're not traveling. You're just at the same place. You guys realize like this just isn't.
Life got a lot slower.
And you have kids at that time? Or
Yeah, we had like a 2 and a 4-year-old at that time. Yeah.
So what did that process look like? Did she stay and you moved to the States, or what did that unraveling look like?
We ended up moving to Texas to be around her folks. She's from Texas.
Okay.
And that's when it all kind of actually started taking place of where we split up and kind of navigated how to deconstruct a life that you built together. And, and it was really hard. Like the first year was really hard. The second year was still hard. Third year was pretty good. The fourth year's been great. Like we've worked, people don't work hard enough on their divorce. It's funny, like you know, I don't know if people are listening that have never been divorced, this won't mean anything, but it's like people don't work hard enough on their marriages, but they really don't work hard enough on their divorces. Like, who wants to put effort into a relationship after?
That's over.
Yeah, but it's like, it's not over because you have kids, you know,
right.
That's always the mother of your children. And you got to put like real effort in and honor and cherish that relationship, no matter the, you know, the lies or deceit or hard feelings or bitterness or like all the crap that goes along with spending a decade with someone and having it not work out. It's like, you still got to honor that relationship and put effort into it, or your life's just going to be messy.
Well, and obviously you guys had a friendship, because if you went 11 years and are having fun, then there was like at least a core friendship that existed.
For sure. And you know, we had our goods, we had our bads, but we put a lot of work into having a really good co-parenting relationship, and we still do. It's still
Is she in Texas still, or
she's here?
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, we all live here. We have the kids at 50-50, and it's, you know, we help each other out, and it's nice.
Yeah, it's so important. You know, I've now, just as life is, I have many friends who are divorced and co-parent and stuff, and you can see the ones that are putting that work in, like you said, and the ones that don't, just the difference it makes in their lives and their kids' lives ultimately.
Yeah, people are always like, "Oh, you're so lucky. It's that good." I'm like, I'm lucky. Like, definitely she could be like crazy and insane, but most people actually aren't crazy. You know what I mean? Like, everybody's like, "Oh, my ex was crazy." It's like, well, were they? Like, I don't know. But I'm like, dude, you don't see the work that we put in, the ego that I put aside, the extra, you know, things I pay for, do this just to like keep things comfortable and good. And like, I'm like, I work really, really hard to make sure that she's in a good place, the kids are in a good place, I'm in a good place. And that's why it can all be smooth. Yeah. If I was just a bitter a-hole and just like trying to like make things difficult for her, then she would just return that favor and it would spiral. And that's what we see happen with a lot of divorces, you know?
Well, I had a friend who grew up with divorced parents, and when he got divorced, he went like above and beyond to support his ex-wife. He had a kid, and he talked about how when he was a kid, like his dad had all this awesome stuff, but his mom didn't.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't ever want my son to experience like a completely different quality of life with me
100%
than with his mom. You know? So like 100%. He went above and beyond to make sure that his son's life was great either place.
Yeah.
You know, otherwise you're just creating an incentive for them to spend more time in one place than the other.
Yeah. I think that's really important. People don't, I'm sure there are guidebooks of how to be divorced, but like,
I bet there's a bunch of them.
You know, but it's like, I don't think people really realize how much work it can take to do it right, but it's worth it. I mean, any relationship in your life, you know what I mean? Whether it's a coworker or a wife or an ex-wife or a brother or father, like you got to put in the time and the effort and priority to make that relationship good, you know?
So was the divorce your catalyst to decide to figure out a new way to earn income for yourself?
100%. Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm not going to be running sales teams anymore. And I'm like, what can I do where I have flexibility? What can I do where I don't have to travel, that I don't have a 9 to 5 where I can show up? And so that combined with, I don't have anything to freaking lose. Can we swear on this podcast?
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, I don't have anything to fucking lose at this point.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that the home that we're going to raise our children in, that our children were born in. Like, I don't give a shit if I lose that house. Like, it was paid off. You know what I mean? The house is paid off. This is my nest egg. It was in a family trust. I was like, we're set for, you know, but I'm like, I don't give a shit. Yeah. And so I was like, home equity loan. Like, I go out and just pulled out as much equity as I could. And I just like kind of put it all on the line. And it was finally just like, you know, they say, you know, the guy who has nothing to lose is dangerous. And that's where I was at. I was like, I got nothing to lose. Let's go. You know what I mean?
Yeah. A smart mentor of mine said, if things go shitty, you either want to be leveraged to the tilt. Like, everything's leveraged. So it's like, what are you going to do? You can't take anything because I'm just leveraged all the way.
Yeah.
Or you have or you own everything, you know? So you went to that moment of like, I'm HELOCing it out. I'm just going to push the boundaries of what I can do. And was there anyone's advice or books or anything that you did you follow a proven process, or did you kind of create your own?
I felt like I created my own. I just studied everything I possibly could, listened to all the podcasts and books, and like really understood the science behind real estate and how to do it correctly and like how to do it safely. And I developed my own like safe debt guidelines so I could get in debt but do it correctly. And like I developed my own asset analyzer. Like I really like studied the concepts to a point where I could customize it and design it. And I was, okay, this is exactly what I need to do. I knew every penny I had to spend and what cash on cash return I needed to get the cash flow I needed to retire. And I gave myself a year. I said, if I can do it in that year, then I retire. If not, I'll go back to the doors. luckily I pulled it off. And
that's the
never
nice
went
thing
back.
about sales is you're never out of it, because if you're good at sales, then no matter what happens, there's always a job.
Yeah, I always could go back.
You know what I mean? Like at any time. So what is the strategy then? So what, like, you don't have to get deep into it, but what's the global strategy of that you took for your real estate investment?
Yeah, I mean, it was literally as simple as, like I said, I was like, hey, I have this much money. I say you got to look at your resources, like your capital, your time frame, and your goal. I was like, hey, I need to, the initial, and I've been increasing from there. It's like initial, like I need like 8,000 a month or whatever to live off of. So I was like, hey, I have this much money. I need 8,000. So what's the cash and cash return if I deployed, X amount of capital to get this much cash flow? That's the return I need, and then I just bought whatever property.
And were you doing
like,
was it primarily multifamily, or did it kind of just depend on where?
Mostly just single family residential.
Oh, interesting.
And I just started buying all over the country because Utah, the numbers didn't work. So I bought in Kentucky and Oklahoma and New York and Hawaii and Texas and just all over the place. Yeah, wherever.
Did you find one area that was better than others?
Still looking for that one. Still looking for that sweet spot.
I know, like there's a bunch of affordable housing in Ohio.
Yeah, but it has its downsides, right? Like everything, I got everything that has its good. It also has its bad, and I'm like trying to find that sweet spot that like has it all, But.
And so, doing that in COVID, did that, because I know like here specifically, house prices went up during COVID. So were you fighting that a little bit while you were doing your investment? Or were you finding areas where COVID tanked the housing market?
No, I kind of came in just in time. Interest rates were not the lowest they'd been, but they were still low enough. And home prices weren't great and they were going up. But like, as long as, I still was able to make the numbers work better than they have the past couple of years. So I kind of sprinted it the ninth inning, like right at the end of when it would work.
Before everything kind of got all the math.
If I had done the same thing 3 years before, I'd be double where I'm at,
Wow.
But if I'd waited 3 more years, I'd be a quarter of where I'm at.
Have you sold anything, or are you still holding it all for rental?
I try not to sell anything.
You do?
Yeah.
So it's all rental based. So do you use property management companies in all those areas, or do you handle it yourself?
I have a little bit of property management. Most of it I do myself. I buy in a lot of small towns, and there's not really good property managers, so I've learned to do a lot of it remotely. Yeah.
Wow, that's got to be tough.
Yeah, it's a trip, but I found ways to make it work.
Small towns are where the value is.
That's where the cash flow is. That doesn't mean that's where the appreciation and the tax write-offs and all the other benefits. So it's like, I don't know how much we want to get into real estate, but it's like, it depends on what your goals are, right?
Yeah.
And my goal was strictly cash flow. I was like, as soon as I can retire, then I can go make, other moves for appreciation and windfalls and make big money or flip that, But right now I just need to focus on the cash flow. So being really, really clear on what your goal is super important to be able to like focus on and get some clarity, because there's just so many options out there.
I love that. So are you still in that cash flow phase of this plan, or like what's the next phase for you in real estate?
Yeah, man. I probably just keep building the cash flow. It's hard for me to care about money, man. Like I've never really cared about money. I've always cared about freedom.
Yeah.
And I knew money was a way to freedom, but the more of the taste of freedom I get, the harder it is to want to go sacrifice my freedom to make money to do what? Buy freedom? You know what I mean? Like I don't need a Lamborghini, but I really like freedom. And so it's a tricky, I'm like, man, sometimes I feel like I should do a little more, but I'm enjoying life quite a bit.
Yeah, freedom's such a special thing, because even people who think they have it, they don't, because they stop for a minute and said like, oh no, I've got freedom, but it's like, well, what happened if you stop going to work?
Yeah.
Then how free are you?
Yeah. And that's what I did, and then I was like, oh, I love this.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I'm different. I hear some people like, oh, they have an exit or whatever, they retire, and then like after 6 months, they're like chomping at the bit, like they got to go back and start a new company or go, make some big money or make some big moves. And I'm just like, no, this is great. Like I'm doing everything I want. I'm going on the trips I want. I'm playing. I'm doing my hobbies. I have time to like think.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just wrote like a children's book for my kids to help them like learn how healthy, happy habits. It's called Healthy and Happy.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Yeah, it's just kind of fun. It was like just these little pet projects that like I would never have time for before when I was just grinding. I was like, I'm never going to make a penny off this thing, but I had this fun little concept. I made this little song to help my kids like build good habits, like eat healthy and move their body and do things that scare you and just like do hard things. Like it just saw a list of like, if you do this, you'll be living a happy life.
So self-help for kids.
Yeah, self-help for kids, just trying to teach my kids. And so I turned it into a little book. I'm getting my first order of the published book like next week. And
That's
there's
awesome.
like I had my buddy, he's an awesome singer song producer, so he like made like a legit, like it sounds like a 90s punk rock song to like go with the book. And it's just
awesome.
like being able to pour into these fun pet projects that I never could have when, you know, because they don't make money, and when your time is justified by money, then you don't do that, you know what I mean? And I put a lot of thought studying Buddhism and Stoicism and all these concepts, especially when I was going through, you know, exiting my faith that I grew up in, and, you know, exiting my marriage. There's a lot, when you shift huge paradigms like that, you know, you got to do a lot of introspection to do it healthily. And I felt like I did. I created a thing called the Love and Life Framework, is kind of like my value system and how I view the world. And I've created that. I'm happy to share it too. Any
was the Love and Life, was that because you lost like the guidance that the Book of Mormon gave you? Was it kind of like a replacement to that in a sense?
Kinda. Yeah. It was like, okay, I don't want to just exit my religion and have no value system and just get like lost and confused and do things that can screw up my life. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the fear in religion. Like, hey, if you leave, like you're screwed, you know,
you're going to hell.
And I was like nervous that like my whole life would fall apart because that's what they tell you. It turns out not true. Spoiler alert. Like you can live a dope life. But I didn't know that. And so I did want to like be very careful of like, what were my values? What did I know was true and would help? And I created this whole like what I call the value columns, right? So there's three. There's the intrinsic values, there's personal values, and then there's community values. And if you can max all three out, that's the best life. And if any of them lacking, you're going to feel dissonance in your life. And the intrinsic values are the things that are true across the board for no matter what you believe, race, religion, sex, gender. If you were born 1,000 years ago or 1,000 in the future, this will be true. Like healthy relationships, a healthy body, you know, gratitude. Like these are just intrinsic values that will make your life better no matter who you are.
Sure.
And then and then personal values are the things that matter to you. Like, what do you love to do, Cody? Like, what's a passion of yours or a hobby?
I just got into pickleball. It's
pickleball, right? So that could be a personal value. It doesn't need to be the same throughout your life. Sure. It doesn't need to be the same for anyone else. The next person might hate it, but for you, it sets you on fire. It feels good. You love it. It could be art. It could be acting. It could be writing. You know, whatever your personal values are, that's shifting and changing and different for each person. Unlike intrinsic values that are true across the board forever.
Sure.
And you got to be aware of that though, right? So you need to know what the intrinsic values are. You need to know what your personal values are and honor those. And then you got to respect the community values. Now, you don't need to agree with them, but if you are trying to kick against the pricks, as the Bible would say, but like if you're trying to like fight the system, that's a rough life. You know what I mean?
What's funny is I asked you before we sat down. So if you're listening to this, it's tomorrow's the 11th, so it's the 18th, and today is the debate with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And it's like, I feel like politics have become exactly the opposite of what you're saying. It's everyone fighting each other.
Oh, yeah.
Like the respect of the community. Obviously, people are always going to have differences of opinions.
Yeah,
but I feel like now, if you disagree, then like there's like vitriol towards each other.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like that's not a healthy way to live. It's always going to add dissonance, add problems in people's lives, you know. And I see a lot of people, sometimes when people leave their religion, now there's so much bitterness that they're like fighting that religion.
Oh yeah, I mean they want to like talk badly about it, almost to justify their decision, you know. And
that's hard in Utah, where it's so predominantly Mormon. It's like if you're gonna fight Mormonism in Utah, like that'll be a rough road to be on, you know?
Yeah.
Like I look at it like, you know, when I go to Thailand, I visit a Buddhist temple, and I'm like, I don't know anything about that religion, and I'm not like into that, but like I'll take my shoes off and cover my head and I just respect whatever their value is.
Yeah,
you know, if they say that's important, I'm like, cool. You know, and
that's a good way to put it.
And that's how I've looked at it with my leaving Mormonism, is like, okay, like, but I'll still just, if that's what they want, cool. Like I'll respect, you know, these Mormon monks I'm walking around, these Buddhist monks I walk around, you know, whatever their religion is, whatever the community says is important.
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it.
I'll respect that.
I'm curious, what was the catalyst to your exit? Like after a devout, 30 plus years to it, and you went on a mission, like what made you decide to leave?
Oh man, we could get into a lot of stuff. But I mean, the simplest answer, and I was all in, like life was good for me. I was like a white, straight male in the church. Like there was no like, nothing was bad for me. And I didn't even like party or like sin, do the things the church said not to. Like I had no reason to exit. I just found out it wasn't what it claimed to be. And I couldn't unsee what I had seen. And it was like, oh.
What was it that you saw that made you feel that way? If you're comfortable sharing.
No, you're good. Yeah, I mean, there's kind of this concept in a lot of people have exited the church, and there's this concept of like, if you have an issue, you're like, oh, that's weird. I can't figure it out right now. God's ways are not my ways. I'll put that up on the shelf.
That's what they call it, putting it on the shelf.
And you put
right?
it on the shelf. You put it on the shelf.
Yeah.
You put it on the shelf. And you do that enough times, that shelf
heavy.
breaks.
Yeah.
And for me, when that shelf broke, I say it's like I had these Mormon goggles that fell off, and I just couldn't get them back on. Like there were just so many things, and when you see it all in one place, and when that shelf breaks and it's all just sitting there in front of you, you're like,
were you
no way this is what it says it
married
is.
At the time that you left?
I was, yeah. That was like 2015.
Was that a part of your guys' differences? Did your wife stay in it?
We stayed married. She stayed in it. And we stayed married for like 4 or 5 more years. It wasn't a big deal to me. It was kind of a big deal to her, but we stayed married. And then when she left the church, I think that opened it up more for divorce for her. I think that the church
she was no longer bound by like
I think
church.
the church played a lot bigger role with her role in our marriage than it did for me. I was like,
interesting.
Yeah.
So would she still go to church and stuff?
She did for 4 years after I left.
Did you stop going?
I went with her for most of it,
You did.
just out of support for her and the kids, just out of respect because she was my wife. But
you're a good dude.
Yeah, I try. I try. I had to bite my tongue a lot. But
was there one particular thing that was the thing that broke the shelf for you, or is it just literally the accumulation of a bunch of things?
There's a lot of things, but one of them, which is kind of funny, is I saw this testimony meeting of another religion. I think it was the FLDS actually, and it was the same exact thing.
Yeah,
and I was like, wait a second. Like the same, like everything I'd seen my whole life, like, oh yeah, this is true. Like I know this is true. The emotion, the tears, the spirit, like the true, like the ingrained belief that they believed 100% that Warren Jeffs was a prophet and that this was God's people, And I was like, whoa.
Because as an outsider, you're like, of course he's not.
Yeah. But I was like, that's exactly what I feel for my religion. And then I was like, and then I saw these testimonies of Jews, and I saw these testimonies of Islam, and I saw these people, like I saw all these testimonies, people sharing their testimonies of their religion. And I was like, I don't know why it's not like I hadn't seen that before, but there was something in that moment that I was just like, okay, if the tool for knowing truth is our feelings, I'm not saying it's not the true tool, although I don't think it is, but even if it is, it's not very efficient, to say the least. It's not effective. It doesn't work.
That's why they call it faith, right? Because you can't see it, can't touch it, can't feel it. So where do you find yourself on that spectrum now? As like you've gone through this journey of discovery.
Yeah. So I mean, and so I kind of just strip back and stop focusing on what do I think is true, and what do I think is not necessarily what do I think is false? Like, who is this true? Is that true? I'm like, well, what do I know is true? And that's what led me to the intrinsic values. I'm like, I'm not going to say, there's no Jesus, or there's no God, or there's something that seemed, especially at the beginning, that was really heavy for me to say.
Yeah.
But like, what can I say for sure though? Like, gratitude's good.
Yeah.
Healthy relationships are good. Respect is good. So I just like stripped it really, really down, and now years later, I've been out for like 9 years, you know what I mean? Like, it's a lot easier for me to be like, I don't say the church isn't true, because there's truth taught everywhere.
Sure.
And you feel that, and that's why people stay in every religion, because they have intrinsic values that bless their lives and they roll with that. But I say it's not what it claims to be. And for some people, that's fine. They're just like, it's not what it claims to be, but it's good for me and my family, so we roll with it.
For sure.
I couldn't do that. I was just like, no, like if it's I can't devote my life to something that's not what it claims to be. That seems disingenuous. And it wasn't even a thought. I was just like, well, I can't now.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
right.
Like,
Because now you know with the divinity that you know now that you don't believe it. Just like you had the absolute belief that you did believe it when you did,
Yeah, exactly.
It's been interesting being an outsider in the sense that...
Were you ever LDS?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
So I grew up in Wyoming, and so I came here and really got like a crash course.
Yeah, that'd be wild.
It is fucking wild.
That'd be wild.
Well, and it gets even better. So I come here my sophomore year of high school. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So it's like... everyone is becoming, like they're getting their faculties about them and like starting to have their own opinions and things. And I came early to play basketball, made friends with my neighbor who was a basketball player and a football player. And he's like, dude, we're doing our class. Like, got to take seminary. I was like, well, what's that? He's like, that's it's like a free period. Like, you don't get a credit for it, but like it doesn't matter. I was like, oh, that sounds dope. Like, for sure, I'll take a free period, you know? So I'm with him. We're walking into seminary. We cross the building, cross the street. You know, I'm like, where are we going? He's like, oh, yeah, it's seminary. I was like, wait, what is it? He's like, well, it's like, you know, talk about the church or whatever. And I was like, what?
You're like,
what the hell? Like,
why are we doing this?
I'm bamboozled, you know?
Yeah.
So we get in there, and the first thing they do is like, I think they made someone say a prayer, and then I think someone bared their testimony or something.
Yeah.
And so that's the first time I've ever seen that.
You're just like, what is this?
And I'm like, what the fuck? And then they're like, open up to Joseph 32:18, you know? I don't know. So I'm looking for page like 3,218. I'm like, I can't find it. Like, I don't know. But then, so I was like, I got to get out of here. But then I was like, actually, you know what? I'm going to stay because I better learn what the hell's going on.
Respect the community.
You know,
value.
like I want to at least
gotta know that world.
have a general understanding of what they believe and why they do this. So I did it for a full semester, and like I paid attention. I was like, let me figure it out, you know? I can remember one day some kid was like, oh, Cody, you're going to do the prayer this morning. And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I can't do that. He's like, well, you have to. And my football friend was like, he's not doing the prayer. And he was like, but so it was interesting. And so then I went through that. And even then, that was, you know, 2005, almost 20 years ago. So it's so different now.
It is.
But then, like, I had girls whose parents wouldn't let me date them or couldn't take them to dances. And, like, I was a good kid, too.
Yeah.
But because I didn't have that scarlet letter, like, I just wasn't allowed, you know? And so then I faced some of that, which was really interesting. And so I had a little bit of and then I learned about, like, that they baptize at 8. And so I was a little bit worried raising my kids. Like, shoot, I'd hate to have my kid at 8 be faced with this. Like his other friends being like, oh, what are you doing? Like the church is true. And that's just a lot for an 8-year-old to comprehend, regardless of what the topic is, you know? But for my kids, they've not had that experience at all. Like, I don't even think they realize that they live in a Mormon community.
Yeah.
Because we live out in Desert Color, and during COVID, we had so many people move in from all over the place. Like, so we don't even have a church in our neighborhood. And not that it's good or bad if you don't have one. It's just, it's just a different reality.
And the culture has changed so much from even 10 years ago when I left. Like it's so much more open now, which is great.
And watching, so the point I was actually trying to get to in the longest way possible is that I've watched my friends go through it, right?
Yeah.
Getting married in the temple and being devout, and then being like, oh shit, I don't know, and like watching them grapple with like what they believe or what they don't believe. And some people end up on the spectrum of view of like, I don't believe, but then some people are like, well, actually, I don't believe anymore, but like for my parents and my wife, I'm gonna just keep doing it.
Yep.
Or I've built this particular position in the community, and it's kind of related to that. And so
well, dude, I was gonna be a seminary teacher. Like I taught seminary for like a week up in Timpanogos. Like I was like, man, luckily I got in the sales career though, because if I had been a seminary teacher, one, if you get divorced, you're evil, so I would have lost.
Wait, you
my
can
job.
do that for a living?
For a living.
Oh, I thought you were just saying like it was a calling you.
No,
had.
that was gonna be my job. Like I went through the courses. Like I
Holy
started
shit.
doing the demo teaching. Like, and I'm like, man, if that had been my career, and then I found out the church wasn't what it claimed to be, it'd been like
tough.
Even just getting divorced, you would lose your career. You can't be divorced and be a seminary teacher. So it's like,
oh really?
Which is wild.
Well, I guess you can't be a nun and be married. Like they've all got their shit. You know?
But I'm like, I would have lost my career if through either the divorce or leaving the church, either one. And it's like, yeah, man. For me, it was a lot easier. For some people, it's a lot harder. And I had a really dope family. Like my parents were like I knew that they would love me and treat me the same, no matter what I did or thought or believed. Like there was zero like, I don't know, like. Oh, they're not going to love me. Like they're not going to do that. Like,
well, and one of my friends, you know, he's really like the leader of his family, and I mean in the sense of like his dad's kind of absent, just a little bit flaky, and so like his mom, his younger sisters, like he is a leader. It's just who he is, you know.
Yeah.
And his sister works for the church, and so I was like, how do you handle that? Because you provide such a stable like spot in your family that I think that they genuinely would follow your advice on any topic. So how do you grapple with your beliefs? Because you obviously don't want to. You're not trying to pivot her out of what she believes.
Right.
But you also can't necessarily be completely forthright because you know you would sway her even without wanting to.
Yeah.
You know? And she's actually getting married. He's like, well, it'll be interesting because she's getting married. I'm not going to go in the temple. So it'll be the first time they're going to be like, wait, You're going to stay outside?
You're like, yeah.
So that's like happening right now. So it'll be interesting to see what the outcome of that is.
It's a tricky world, man. And everybody's situation is so different. That's why I just kind of respect everybody of like however they need to navigate it. And
I think that stance is, and I'm really talking about the Buddhists. I think what was good about what you did is you pulled us out of our reality. Because I think when you're in Utah, it's like,
so heavy.
You're just like, no, like, fuck that.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then when you talk about like, would you really go to a Buddhist commune? And they're like, could you take your shoes off? And you're gonna be like, no, your church isn't real.
Yeah,
like you would never,
exactly.
You would never ever do that, But we will do that here because it's just more of our reality. We didn't like travel across the world to go see some sacred place, you know. So I love the way that you preface that, and I think that's such a great way to live, and I think that's what we need as like a society, as America, is to find that respective community again.
Yeah, and if people could look at those value columns, like I said, if they could really, and that's all in my Love and Life.
So
framework.
do you do like do you fill out a thing and it helps you determine those, or is it?
Yeah, like I mean, I'd like to flesh out, make it more interactive like that, but that's what people should do. They should write a list of everything that they think are intrinsic values and test it. Like, would that be true if you were Black in southern Georgia back during slavery? Would this still hold true?
Sure.
And if it does, like, gratitude would have been good for that person. It'd be good for me. It's like, okay, that's an intrinsic value. You can kind of test the things, and you can like, hey, well, these are the things that are important. These are my personal ones, regardless of what everybody else wants. What do I want? What turns me on? Do I need to be in nature every day? Then like, I need to be in nature every day, and I need to like honor that. And there's value in that. I can't be like, well, it's not important. I need to go work, or there's. It's like, no, you got to do the things that like honor your personal value.
Well, I think so many people miss that step of life too, where they like just get into it,
Yeah, they're
kinda
doing what everybody says to do.
Kind of like you're like, oh, my wife's in debt, so I'm gonna get her out of debt. Like it's just, you're just doing it because like that's just the logical thing to do. But there's so many people who are. Someone was asking me about entrepreneurship the other day, and I said, well, it can be great, but there's many entrepreneurs who are slaves to their company. Like
100%,
they don't own their company; the company owns them.
Yeah.
Like they think like, oh, I've got all this freedom, but it's like they really don't, because it's their company, so they're more required than someone who's maybe just an employee. It's like really about determining what do you want for yourself. And I think that's the question that like our young generation really needs to flesh out for themselves before they get started down a path, because I think we just kind of go.
And for some people, their personal value is to have the best of everything, the nicest of everything. Sure. And they're willing to, grind and sacrifice and miss out on all this play and fun and family. And that's important to them, and they're honoring their personal value. Good for them, But some people, like, I felt like I was selling my soul every day I was out just chasing money, because I enjoyed my slow time, my play, my freedom. Like, that was so much more important to me. And when I could finally start, like, but the world I was in was like, that's lazy and you're stupid. Like, no, like we make money, and then when we do have any amount of time, we just are bougie as hell, because that's the only way we have so much money. We might as well go to the nicest restaurants and do the nice stuff. I'm like, dude, I just want to go rock climb and snowboard and travel and canyoneer and trail run and hang out with my friends. Like, that's what turns me on. It's like, I don't need money for any of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So,
well, it's interesting in life how there's seasons to it, because I can remember being a young sales executive, and like I prided myself on being like readily available for my team.
100%. Yeah.
Like it's 9:00. It's like, yeah, dude,
midnight,
what's going on?
Let's go.
Like, are we closing somebody? What do you need me to do? And I wore it as like a badge of honor of like, I will outwork you. Like, I'm better than you because I'm going to work harder when you won't, And I remember being at a bar with my friend, Mike Gutierrez, if you're listening, shout out to you and my wife. It wasn't a bar. It was, what's the place with all the video arcade games but has like beer? Dave & Buster's.
Okay,
David Buster's. And I had like answered a call from like one of my teams. It was like 8:30 or something. He's like, dude, like, clock out, man. Like, and I was like, never.
Dude, I remember being in the hospital when my child was born, and I'm like stepping out, like taking freaking calls from recruits and stuff.
And I got mad at him. He was like, dude, you need to like, it's cool. Like, do it tomorrow. And I was like, no, dude, you don't understand the grind. Like, this is how I create my greatness, And I actually got mad and left the bar. Yeah. Like, and we got into a fight. In fact, when I think it was my daughter was born, there's a picture of me like on my laptop in the room with my wife. Like, she wasn't having the baby at the time, but she was in there, and I'm sending out emails and I prided, and I thought that made me like, this is why I'm a great employee, because I'm willing to do what other people aren't willing to do. Now I realize, like, God, that was so stupid.
Yeah, and it's hard. It's like, at the time though, maybe that's what it took. You know what I mean? It's what gets you here won't get you there. Yeah, it's true. And it's easy to say on the flip end, they're like, oh, I worked too hard. And I'm like, but it also set me up to go buy my freedom.
And then I had my kid come in, and I was like, I really got to grind.
Yeah, so it's like, I don't know, it's hard, but I remember the same thing. I was that guy, like, for 9 years straight, I never missed a single day of knocking during the summer. I was the only person I knew. I was like, I didn't miss a single day.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like, dude, you've never missed a day. I'm like, I've never missed a day. I had a broken ankle. I'd been sick. I had babies. Like, I never missed a day of knocking during the summer when you knocked. And that was just kind of my identity, you know?
Yeah,
it was like,
for sure.
I had to do some paradigm shifting when I was like, oh, well, what really matters to me more than making money, you know? But again, it's easy to say that because I had enough money now. You know what I mean? So it's like all the wealthy, the rich.
You couldn't feel that way if you were broke right now.
Yeah, you know, anybody's like, oh, money doesn't matter. It's like, yeah, when you have it, you know what I mean? But it's true. Like, once you have enough, money doesn't matter once you have
it kind of
enough,
goes back to your point of what you were cash flowing for. It's like you could set your cash flow up for very different types of lives depending on how you strategically got to where you are, right? So a life can cost you very disparaging amounts of money based on how you decide that you want to live it.
And who knows, you know, I've been enjoying my freedom a little more, and I've got young kids, and like maybe once my kids are a little older and I've played enough, I'll be like, dude, I'm hungry again, and I'll go, you know, chase down some big money that'll give me a lot of cool opportunities and open a lot of doors. You know what I mean? Like you said, there's different phases in life.
Yeah.
And that's why you got to honor your personal, honor where you're at, when you're at it, you know what I mean? And just do what you need to do in that moment in life.
How old are your kids now?
5 and 7. My boy turns 6 next month.
So not quite like in full day school yet? Maybe?
Just barely. He just started
kindergarten?
Month. Yeah, last month. They're both finally in full-time school for the first time. So it's like, it's opening up.
Now you got 6 hours of free time every day.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, oh, okay.
Now you can really go out and play.
Yeah, so I think there'll be different phases, you know, and maybe I'll chase money down later, and, you know, maybe not. We'll see.
Yeah, probably not after you've like had so much fun not doing it.
It's hard, you know.
You know, could you imagine going back and going on a I don't know how long summer is, 4 months of knocking every single day with the freedom you've had now?
No, if I were to do anything, it'd be like building building a business that's going to be like something of like substantial wealth that I own, like that I'm really going to grow something like impactful, you know?
So we talked a lot about like self-development and self-improvement. Were there any like, because obviously this is based off of my book, and reading has really helped me gain the knowledge that I wanted in life and find those answers to the questions I didn't know. So are there any impactful books that helped you along your journey to like that self-development, like just that, you know, the mindset that sales puts you in?
Dude, I read a lot. I mean, I listen a lot, right? It's all on Audible. But man, I mean, I burn through books. You know, I used to set a goal to do like at least 12 a year, one a month. You know what I mean? And like, I'm usually at that like 2 or 3 months into the year now. You know what I mean? Like, I love reading. I think it's, you know, I used to listen to a lot of podcasts. But then after a while, especially now, everybody has a podcast, right? Like you have a podcast, I have 2 podcasts, like, and who the hell are we? We're not even like, you know, big deals in the world. And it's like, there's so much out there, which is fine. I love podcasts still. I think you can gain a lot from them. Yeah. Like say, I host them as well. But it's like a good book, like you wrote a book, like you put a lot more prep into that book than you did this podcast.
For sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
An hour of listening to your book, I think someone would gain a lot more than an hour of listening to this podcast.
Yeah. I guess it depends what they're after, but certainly there's more forethought into that, right?
And so I like to do both. I like podcasts, but I love a good book that someone put, you know, years into. I'm like, man, I can get some real tasty stuff from that. But yeah, a couple of the books were life-changing for me. 7 Habits, Stephen Covey. Yeah.
Old school, but just so good.
Talk about intrinsic values, right? Just like be proactive, start with the end in mind. Like, you know,
all those old school books that have kept their like The Richest Man in Babylon, that's like as good today as it was however many years ago. You know, it's like, you know, in something like that, or How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm sure
that was another big one. Yeah,
you know, that's like the key right there to building relationships.
Yeah, because those are intrinsic truths. Those are, you know, in the church, eternal principles is what you call it if you're a Mormon. But like I call them intrinsic values. But these things are just true. Yeah. And that's why they stood this test of time. Right. You know? But yeah, 7 Habits was a big one. How to Win Friends was a great one. The Compound Effect was a big one for me. It's kind of, you know, Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
It's the same book.
Oh, yes, I have. It's got the cover's yellow with like a red flywheel on it, I think.
I think that's Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits is white.
Oh, okay. I don't know. Compound Effect, I think has red on it. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I know the book.
It was so good.
It is Atomic Habits, said differently.
Or yeah, so the compound effect, and they're like the same book. If you've read one before the other, then that's going to be the one you love. But that was a big one for me. It was like, oh yeah, like all the little things I do determine my habits. That creates my entire life and character. And like it was like big for me when I read that. So compound effect was a game changer. But the Untethered Soul more recently, you know, when you get
I've seen that one. I haven't read that, but I've seen that. Who's the author of that one? Do you recall? Because that's one that I've seen, like, it keeps popping up, and I feel like my wife just told me we needed to read it. And, but I can't visualize it for some reason.
It's a good one. I can't remember the author's name right now, but Michael Singer.
Okay.
Michael Singer, The Untethered Soul. That's a really good one. And then I got really into Stoicism. Like, I love Stoicism. I don't know if you're much familiar with that, but yeah, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, you know, these ancient Greek philosophies, again, just teaching pragmatic life advice.
That's what's so cool about Marcus Aurelius. It's like his journal entries. Yeah. Like what's the book?
Meditations.
Meditations, yeah. Mm-hmm. That's just like his shit that he said 2,000 years ago.
And it's like, it's so applicable. You know, again, because they're just true across the board. It's like, yeah, people are going to treat you like shit today and it's going to be a hard day. Like, go into it prepared for that. You're like, that's good advice.
Think how amazing it is to have your word impact people 2,000, or I don't even know how many years.
Yeah, thousands. I mean, these guys are, thousands of years before Christ even. And it's like, it's funny because one of the principles in Stoicism they talk about is they're like, dude, no one's going to fucking remember you. Like, you're going to die. Everybody you know is going to die, and you're going to be forgot of forever. So, like, relax. Stop worrying about your ego so much. Yeah. But then the ironic thing is, like, because we do remember them. Like, we're like, Marcus Aurelius.
Because he did it. What's funny, my wife's reading The Mountain Is You right now. She's really digging that. And she said that, she just read me a couple paragraphs from it last night. And was talking about, like, when you transition out of a relationship, friendship, marriage, whatever, and if you do it in the sense of like, oh, I'm going to show them why they were wrong or what they're missing out on, like you're never actually healing and you're never moving on.
Yeah.
And, like no one gives a shit anyways. Like you think you're important to other people, but like you're only really important to yourself.
Yeah.
You know, like that Instagram post that you do that you think like this is going to get them. Like they probably won't even fucking see it.
It's just going to mess you up.
And they're just going to scroll. Yeah. It's like there's no healing that takes place if you're doing it for anyone but yourself.
It's so true. Like, and that's what I love about Stoicism. It's just so pragmatic. Like, if you're a devout, hardcore Mormon or like the most like, you know, fundamental Jew or no matter who you are, or you're a devout atheist, you study Stoicism, you're like, yeah, this is good stuff. It's like, it's so applicable and pragmatic and logical and just good life advice without all the mythology and the dogma that surrounds our traditions. Yeah.
Well, I think that your intrinsic value thing, it's like if you put all the religions up on a board, you're just taking out all of those things that are just naturally true and that make the religion good without all the other bullshit.
Exactly. That's how I view it. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And also for any of your listeners, if anybody wants access to that or my Healthy Happy book, if you just go to my website, Joseph F. Jensen, just my name and middle initial F is in freedom, josephfjensen.com. You can get links to all that stuff.
Sweet.
For your listeners,
I'll put that in the show notes for everyone who's listening. Well, let's wrap up. I got 3 questions I want to ask you.
Sure.
What's the biggest win you've ever had in your life?
Oh, man, the biggest win was when I hit my cash flow number and I didn't have to go back to the doors and I was able to, retire at 35. I was like, yes.
How long did it take you from when you started that desire to when you achieved it?
About a year. I give myself a year.
That's pretty fucking awesome. Yeah, that's a short period of time.
Yeah. That's all the money I had. I had my savings. I'm like, okay, I can live off this much. And then I have this much to invest. And if I don't pull it off, then I have to go make money. So like I squoze it out.
That's awesome. Okay, and then the opposite side of that was, what's the biggest loss you've ever had?
The biggest loss I've ever had? Oh, man, it's like, I don't know, like, that's a hard one.
It's a hard
because
question
they're like
answer.
They're all good. You know what I mean?
That's the beauty of it. Well, and the reason I bring that up, so I was joking at my son's football game yesterday. One of my son's friends, his dad, Luke, my wife was saying, Luke, you should come on the podcast. He's like, oh, I don't have a lot of wins, but like I got a lot of losses.
You're like, hey, let's
and
talk
I was
about
like,
those.
dude, people love losses because you can relate to that.
I always thought about doing a podcast, and I kind of did start one almost, but where you just interview people and all the shit that went wrong. Like no wins, like the total loss. Like interview all the mistakes. that's all you can talk about.
The hard part is that people who make a lot of mistakes usually end up on the other side of it, you know? And then it's oh yeah, I got here because like I had an amazing guest, Nicole Younger. She was a meth addict.
Okay.
And a meth cook.
Yeah.
Like she lived in like an abandoned building. Like her life was as fucked as a life can get. And now she's unbelievably successful. But people love to hear that story because then you're like, oh, okay, I'm not a meth cook and Nicole did it. So like, certainly I can do it. You know, so losses give you the ability to connect in a different way than if you only came on here and talked about how awesome and badass you are and how incredible your life is. People are going to tune out because they're like, I'm not Joe, so I can't relate to that.
I have this affirmation I say almost daily that it's all people and circumstances are my allies. And I don't believe like everything happens for a reason. But that's kind of what that it's kind of like that's kind of the idea.
You're just saying
like,
it cooler.
I can make it my ally. It's not necessarily for a reason, like and not necessarily a bigger picture. But in wartime, like someone could be your ally, but they're not your friend. You know what I mean? Yeah. But they're your ally, and I'm like, so I look at like my divorce was probably the one that came to mind. That was like the biggest like blow, like like paradigm shift. This and that. But I mean, man, that's opened up so many opportunities in my life. And like I said, that's when I finally got financially risky and rewarded and played big.
Yeah, because you took away all that responsibility.
Yeah, and it just shifted. Like, okay, now things are different. I was so scared of like failing before, but now I was like, well, I fucking lost all this. I might as well just go ham. You know what I mean? Like, and so it just opened up a lot of doors.
And that's such a great lesson too, because you were the exact same person. You just removed fear.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And the reason that I like people to share that is because we just unveiled, like for you, it wasn't even who you were, what your means were, your capabilities. It was literally fear of like being a provider. Yeah. And you were able to remove that and it allowed you to find success. But also because someone right now is going through like that divorce or that thing that's their biggest blow or their biggest loss. And when you're in it, you like can't see out of it because you feel like this is just your life now and everything's fucked.
Yeah.
But everyone will come outside of it, right? And so even like the reason that everyone always pauses, unless it's like a loss of like a person.
Sure.
But if it's not a loss of a person, they almost always pause and say, well...
But it doesn't count because it worked out.
Now, like, you know what I mean? And so I really say that because I think oftentimes people who are seeking out information may be in the midst of a loss too. So maybe someone stumbles across this podcast because they're struggling with something. And then you can share that. Maybe they just got divorced and they're like, oh, okay, 4 years down the road, like now he's financially free.
And I remember distinctly having this feeling of like, oh man, I'm always going to have now a second-rate life. It's never going to be the ideal. Like,
interesting.
That sucked. That feeling.
I could see that.
And I could see if
you're never
like,
going to have like your core family. No
you're not going to have like what you always thought. And I think if someone lost a limb, I think of that. Like, man, if you lost a leg, it's like, fuck, I can still get around, but I'm never going to have like, it's always going to be a second-rate life. Like these big things. But now coming out the other side, it's like not true at all. Like in all circumstances can be your allies to live a better life than you ever imagined.
Do you see yourself getting married again?
Potentially. I have some qualms with like the institution of marriage and how the government's like in this weird threesome with you. And like, I think it needs to be restructured.
Well, and what's your benefit to marriage?
Yeah, but
for who you are today.
I would love a committed life partner. Like I'm a relationship guy. Like, that would be my ideal, is a lifelong committed partner that we get to just go live a dope life together for sure.
Just remove the institution of it.
And I'd be open to marriage potentially, but like I said, I think the Marriage Institute, it's like, it's kind of just a given, but I'm like, have we looked at this? Like, is this really like how we want it to be?
I mean, would you make your new wife sign a prenup, do you think?
Oh, 1,000,000%. And my kids will never get married without a prenup. It's insanity. But I wouldn't even do a prenup. I have this whole concept I want to build called the family blueprint, where it's like you go through and design everything of why you're joining lives, why you're having kids, what you want that structure to look like. And then you develop that structure. It's almost like an entity, like an LLC or a trust, that's how it should be, as opposed to this like arbitrary, like, because every relationship's different. You know what I mean? If a woman stops working and raises kids for 10 years, that's different than the girl who works the whole same time and never had kids. Like, but it doesn't always look that way, in divorce. It's like, why? Anyway,
I agree. I think
it should be very customized blueprint to what you're trying to accomplish.
I think people joke about like treating your home life like a business, but oftentimes we treat our businesses way better than we treat our relationships.
Yeah.
So I think taking that perspective and saying like, we're going to treat our household like a business, Like, we have a budget for a family that we run off of, and we have consistent meetings. Like, we treat it the exact same. Like, my budget for my company is the exact same as my budget for the family. The line items are different.
Yeah.
But the way that we approach it is exactly the same.
Well, and what's the common goal? What are we trying to build? And what are we willing to sacrifice? And what does it look like if someone needs to exit? You know what I mean? Like, all of that.
Divorce rate would be a
out.
lot different if people put that forethought into it before engagement, right?
Yeah.
And I was telling my wife the other day, I was like, if I got divorced now, I would have no problem giving you half of it because we literally built it together. We've been together for 17 years. So it's like I had nothing when we got married. You didn't have anything. So it's like we did this together. It's ours. But if I married someone today, that person gets nothing.
Right.
You weren't there when like I would only eat ramen, you know, like when I had $3 a day to spend, or when I was leveraged to the tilt. Like you don't get any of this good stuff.
Where were you when I was grinding, knocking doors for a decade?
You know? That is like, not yours.
You know, why would you? And I think any person I would marry would be like, like why the hell would I have any claim to that? I don't want that.
100%.
Like, it shouldn't be about money, but unfortunately, the way it's structured right now, it is too much.
So much,
which is a weird incentive on both sides. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. Because then they're incentivized at that point to get married to you and then terminate it with you because there's a financial gain to it.
Yeah, you know, and so I think that we need to restructure it. I'd call it the family blueprint, and there'd be a series of entity structures and decisions that are made kind of like a prenup.
Well, and also people don't do those things like you talked about, having a trust, and having your life insurance, and does that life insurance, if you were to pass, is that really going to cover what you would bring in?
Yeah, and
there's
just
so many fundamentals.
And just going through the goals, like do we want kids? Do we not? Do we want this? Do we want that? Like, how does this happen? Like, just design the whole blueprint of why you're committing your lives together.
That's a good idea. Turn that into a workshop.
Yeah, it'd be an awesome workshop, and I think everybody should be required to go through that before they commit their lives.
It's kind of like when immigrants have to take our citizenship test, you know?
Yeah, like why don't we
married couples should have to take like a blueprint test before they get married.
Exactly, for sure. Like everybody should do the family blueprint.
That put the white chapels in Vegas out of business. Fuck.
Yeah, and maybe not required, but at least make it like commonplace and available.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that.
So,
okay, last question. How do you define success?
Oh, success to me is freedom.
I knew you were going to say that.
Yeah, dude, it's freedom. Like that's my motto. That's my LLC. Was my like office freedom. You know, and there's physical freedom, like being able to do what you want when you want physically. You know, I can jump, I can run, go play.
Sure,
you know?
Fitness.
There's
freedom.
Emotional freedom. You're not like caught in your head, and you know, there's financial freedom where you can do whatever you want. There's time freedom. You know what I mean? And that's funny thing is like I'm retired. I have time freedom, and I think I'm recovering of a couple of injuries, but normally I have physical freedom. But I don't have financial freedom. I couldn't just go drop $1 million on some trip just because I want to. You know what I mean? I couldn't just fly to Dubai tomorrow. Like I don't have I used to think financial freedom meant like you didn't have to work.
That's an interesting statement because I think a lot of people listening would think if your cash flow covers your costs, you do have
no, that gives you
freedom.
Time freedom because I don't have to work anymore.
That's a good
the guy that is grinding and is bringing in $1 million a month, that dude has financial freedom. He might not. He won't. He
doesn't have time.
He doesn't have time freedom. Probably.
Wow, what a great perspective.
But he has financial freedom. He's going to stay at whatever resort he wants, drive whatever he wants, do it.
Yeah.
You know, and see, financial freedom, time freedom. I'd say social freedom is another one that it's like, can I hang out with who I want? Can I go to the places that I want to, or am I like blacklisted because I'm a piece of shit in the social world? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Social freedom is an interesting one.
What, on your spectrum of freedom, is there one that you have as your highest value or priority?
Yeah, time, baby.
I figured.
Time for me is it. And then next would be physical, like health. Ability to like what does it matter, man, if you have all the time and money in the world if you can't enjoy it? You know what I mean? Where they say like the healthy man has 1 million goals and the sick man has one.
Yeah, not to die,
just to be better.
Yeah,
he's like,
I love that. That's a great shift on the thought of financial freedom.
Yeah,
I really like that.
And then there's not a right or wrong. People just need to be honest. Like, what is more important to you? And I'll be honest, most people I know would prefer financial freedom than time freedom.
But I think that most people would think on the surface that financial freedom is what you have until you break that down. You know what I mean? Because they just think like, oh, I wish I didn't have to work.
Because the truth is, I know a dozen people that could be right where I'm at, but they love luxury. more than time.
For sure.
And so they're addicted to luxury, and like, good for them. Go for it. Like, go keep grinding. You know, for me, I don't care that much. So, you know,
that's nice.
But it's also relative, you know what I mean? To one person, I'm rich. The next, I'm poor. It's like, it's so relative.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
That's 100% true. Well, Joe, this has been an awesome conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with before we wrap it up?
No, man. I mean, I'm excited. Like I say, if they want to check into some of the stuff I'm doing, go to my website and reach out to me. Like, I'm an open book. I love to connect with people, and yeah, just happy to be here.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I certainly appreciate it. For all the listeners, I've got Joe's information, Instagram, website, all in the show notes. Go check it out, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Joe.